Yep.
Okay. So we are live streaming, which is okay. And then I'm going to
Yeah.
record it also as a backup. Let me check Facebook, make sure people know that this happens. We're talking here on live stream. There it is. Perfect. Okay, folks, we're going to do an intro. 3, 2, 1. Hey, good morning, everybody in the U.S. and around the world. Welcome to Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo. Thanks for joining us today. And as always, we want to thank all of you in the U.S. and around the world for spreading the show. We're in over 100 countries, and we have coaches, players, and parents listening to us, and we really appreciate it. Also, we're on Facebook Live, YouTube, and LinkedIn, Twitter. We're all over the place live. We will also be on ESPN Audio, ESPN Honolulu. Thank you, everybody. Aloha. And also, don't forget, baseballoutsidethebox.com. We'll have the audio there up tomorrow. So, folks, hey, I have a special guest today, another one. We got some great ones, and this is going to be a fantastic show, I guarantee you, because right now we're going to introduce to you our special guest, Ted Barrett, Major League umpire. He started in 1994 when he debuted it. You know, the background he has is incredible. I'm going to talk about the athlete he was when he was younger, but he's umpired perfect games, no hitters, crew. He's been the crew chief. He's been the all-star game. He's the only umpire that worked 3 perfect games. But get this, only in the history as an umpired 2 perfect games by home plate. Could you imagine that? I mean, talk about pressure. He's also umpired the World Baseball Classic 2009, 13, and 17. Hey, Greg Maddox, 300th win behind the plate. I mean, that's just a few things, but let me welcome our guest today, Ted Barrett. What's up, buddy?
Hey, buddy. How you doing? So glad to be with you. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, last time, I had the great pleasure, and I say it really well because it's such an honor to work with professional people, professional umpires. When I got a chance to work with you at the World Baseball Classic, that was outstanding. I loved it. And that was the last time I saw you, man.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen you on the podcast a few times, but yeah, seeing you in person, what a great venue that was too. We were out there in Korea, and what a great country that was. Good time.
It's great to see Major League umpires. It's great to see professionals in the game, players that really love the international part of the game, because, you guys are busy. You got 162 or 65 games, whatever it is. You got spring training, you got all this stuff, but yet then you take the time to go to a World Baseball Classic and do that. Since we're talking about that, talk about your experience there. Why would you do that when you've done everything else as an umpire?
You there, Ted? You froze on me a second there, Pete, but sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Hey, I'm just curious. I love that, Major League umpires are part of the World Baseball Classic. You've got players that participate. But, you guys have a strenuous schedule. Talk about spring training and all these Major League games you have. And all of a sudden you take the time to go overseas and do this. Why would you do that? Why not relax? What's so special about working something like the World Baseball Classic?
Well, like you, I love to travel. And I think the sport of baseball is awesome because it's the international language, right? And man, the first WBC got to go to Mexico City, and then we went we've been to Korea, we've been to forget where the other one. I signed up for the WBC to travel, and I did the one in San Francisco, which was fun anyway. But any chance I get to go over and see another country and experience another culture, man, I'm in. And you're right, we do have a strenuous schedule. Sometimes in the winter, you just the last thing you want to do is go get on an airplane. But for me, I really want to experience as much as I can. And I'm sure we'll get to it later, but I love going to different countries and doing different work. But getting to go over an umpire, that's pretty special. You talk about all the things as you were reading at the beginning. A lot of the cool things that I've been able to experience on the field. Definitely the travel is one of the best. 2004, I got to do the All-Star series with when the U.S. team went over to Japan.
Wow.
And we went to 5 or 6 different Japanese cities, and that was so much fun. And just traveling around and experiencing the country. And they were such great hosts. As you know, you do these WBC events, and they'll just roll out the red carpet for you. They put their best foot forward. So, man, we're getting the ultimate experience, and it's awesome. And I get why some guys don't want to do it. They don't want to travel. But for me, any chance I get, I'm there.
It's great to hear that. And I remember the Michael Jordan story. And folks, I'm looking down in Facebook. If you got any questions, what a great time to ask a major league umpire questions. Obviously, there's some things that Ted can't answer and some that he can't. We'll be honest with you about that. But, the other part I want to mention, we're going to talk about later, folks. Listen, Ted is also heavily involved in the Christian ministries. He's got a master's degree in biblical studies, Christian college, and a seminary, and a doctorate in theology. We're going to get into that because he travels to Cuba quite a bit, and I want to talk about that. But if you got any questions, just type them in the comments section. That's why I'm looking down, folks. I'm not being rude to our guest. Sometimes people think, oh, what's he doing? He's not paying attention. But I do pay attention. I do listen. Listening skills are critical. Hey, Ted, listen, I'm sure one of the things, I umpired 14 years at Mick Young Baseball School, obviously not at your level, but I got a chance to work with professional umpires, and I've got a lot of respect for umpires as a manager in baseball also, and as a coach. Interesting, when you talk about when you were a young kid, I heard you were a 3-sport athlete, but talk about how you grew up and how you kind of when did you want to be an umpire? When did you start thinking about that?
Yeah, I did. I played a lot of sports growing up, just like you, football, basketball, baseball, boxing, anything I can get out there and play. I didn't have a ball or didn't have a ball. I just loved playing sports. And then when I was 14, my friend had gone to the Little League and gone through an umpiring class. And the season got going along and they had a shortage of umpires just like now. And he said, hey, do you want to come out and umpire? I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. That sounds like fun. And umpiring is one of those things when you get out there and you've done it, but you either love it or you hate it.
Yep.
And I loved it. I thought it was great, but I wasn't ready just to do just umpire. I was still playing. And so I would continue to play and then do Little League games. And I grew up in Buffalo, New York. And when I moved to California, they were playing baseball year round out there. So, and then when I was in college, I played football at Cal State Hayward, Division II school up in Northern California, which is Cal State East Bay now. And my dad told me to get a job. He got tired of paying for my gas and my insurance and my car. So I said, I've done a little bit of umpiring. So I got into a high school group and they were paying, $50 some a game. This is the mid 80s. I'd do 2-3 games a week. That was all the money I needed. A college kid needed, right? My buddies were flipping burgers and working in stores, and I'm outside in the fresh air umpiring high school baseball, and great high school baseball, and that's how I caught the bug. And then from there, when I graduated from college, I was boxing at this time, and my dad he offered to pay for me to go to umpire school, and I thought, hey, this would be a nice little 5-week break. I'll go out to Florida and have some fun. Met a couple guys that were minor league umpires. They gave me some advice on where to go to school. I went to the Joe Brinkman Professional Umpire School in Cocoa, Florida, and I was lucky enough to qualify for a job and went into the minor leagues. And as they say, the rest is history.
Awesome. Hey, I was thinking about when you're talking about umpiring starting young. Talk about why would you? Let's say you're talking to young kids, and obviously they may be playing baseball, and then maybe they decide not to. Why would a young kid, because I started young, and why would he, and I'm with you, I love umpiring. I mean, it was a passion. I couldn't wait to do it. So I know you got to love it, but you also have to start doing it to see if you like it or not. Why would you encourage young people to be umpires at a young age?
Yeah, I think kids 15, 16 years old, I think they should all give it a try for a bunch of reasons. Number one, I think it's going to make you a better player. The more you know the rules. If you're a catcher, you're trying to present the ball the way an umpire likes. If you're a pitcher, how do you talk to an umpire who'll give you some great advice on pitching. And again, just the basic knowledge of the rules. But also now as a 16-year-old kid, I think having the responsibility of running a ball game, being on the field, keeping kids safe, conflict management, all these skills that go into life. One of the great things I loved about playing football as a young man is you get out of the game and you get into life. It translates into so many things, right? The discipline, the practice, the execution. But I think umpiring would translate to a lot of skills for a young person to learn. And not even to do it if you don't want to do it for a living or you don't want to continue. I think just the the basic interaction with parents, right? How many 16-year-old kids are having an argument with a grown man? And learn how to do that and how to communicate effectively, maybe how to diffuse an argument. What great life skills a kid can learn. And and then again, just for the money, if you're 16 years old, you're trying to get a job, you get into college, it's tough to find a good job that you like. Nothing against the people that work in the restaurant industry or anything else. It's hard work and those are good jobs and people are lucky to have them. But there's something about being outside on a diamond and learning a craft that I just think every kid should try it, at least to see how they like it. And there's other sports too, right? There's basketball, there's hockey, there's all kind of sports you can try. And there's such a shortage of officials that they'd be happy to put you to work.
Hey, before I get to another thing I want to talk about, I want to just mention, because he may be off here in a little bit, Tim Leeper, a good friend, former Toronto Blue Jays first base coach, says hello. And, it's great because it's great to get comments, because he says you're an awesome umpire and a great gentleman. So I don't know if you remember Tim, but he was the first base coach with the Blue Jays.
Oh, I sure do. And we really, all the umpires, we really enjoyed when we had the Blue Jays. One of the cool things about that was working first base, because you get to chat with Tim a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just such a great baseball guy and a very good man. And just love talking to him. Not just about baseball, but about life, about, raising kids and being in the game. And so, we missed Tim. Hope he gets back out there sometime.
Yeah, he's a good one, man. He's going to be back in the big leagues. Tim, thanks for jumping on the show here on Facebook. Appreciate it. Real good friend. He does a lot of stuff for us with ISG baseball, travels around the world, and shares his time with coaches. You mentioned conflicts. I got to ask you because, times change, right? So umpires are trained in conflicts. Talk about what you were trained when you first started. And has that training changed? Because the game seems to change also.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because it definitely, when I went to umpire school, it was 1989, and things were a lot different, right?
Yep.
Not just in the game, but in society in general. So we were taught how to manage conflict and arguments, and here we are in 2021, and one thing the replay's done is there aren't too many arguments anymore on the bases, except for
That's true.
It seems like now the conflict comes when there's a controversial replay decision, which, when I first came up, we never were trained how to handle that. So these are all things we're learning on the fly. But, it used to be a young umpire working the bases, would have a close play. The manager would come out, and that's kind of how an umpire would make his bones a little bit. How did he handle the argument? How did he handle the conflict? How did he handle the perceived missed call? All these things played into. But now, as a young umpire gets to the big leagues, the only conflict he's going to have is probably over balls and strikes or a replay decision. So it's definitely changed. You don't see too many, the picture of Lloyd McClendon or Lou Piniella pulling out a base.
Right.
Lloyd took it back to the dugout with him. Lou would try to throw it as far as he could. Those don't happen as much anymore, and that might take away from the entertainment value a little bit, but. It's definitely, a lot of it's changed for the better. And some of it, we could use some of the old fashioned rhubarbs too, but it's definitely changed.
Yeah, there were some fun times, I guess, with managers' arguments and all that. I got to ask you because, sometimes you've heard, whether it's fans or whether it's players or coaches, sometimes they'll say, well, umpires, in the old days, let's say, not with instant replay, but, umpires had short fuses, or, they look for an argument. I mean, I would think you'd try to diffuse the argument first, but then are there times where, hey, wait a second, they might have said something and that's time to stop?
Yeah, there's definitely, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? Where there's just one argument. Sometimes it's carryover from something that's been happening for innings things can carry over to previous games. All those umpires we try to forget, and every game's a new game. But there's definitely, sometimes you'll hear an announcer say, "Oh, this guy's got a short fuse." Well, there are certain automatic words that are going to get you ejected, and the players know that, especially by the time they get to the big leagues. But pretty much anything that's is preceded by you, you or you're terrible, you're blind. your horse crap. We'll keep this PG, but
yes,
it's those type of things that'll get you automatically ejected, no questions asked. Other thing, you might say, hey, that was a terrible call, and that might not be an automatic ejection, but then you're terrible. That's an automatic one. But then even if hey, that was a terrible call, you have your say and then head back to the dugout. But if you want to keep it going, and now I'm going to give you a warning and say, hey, that's enough. Let's go. Then you're going to keep it going. You eventually are going to get ejected. You just can't let people stand out there and argue with you all day, right? So there's parameters, there's lines drawn. The players know them. Most of the time when a player gets ejected, even though he acts shocked, he knew he was probably going to get ejected there. So again, especially at the big league level, these guys came through the minor leagues just like we did. And the minor leagues, there's so much conflict every night. In rookie ball and A ball, you're working 2-man. You've got the plate one night and the bases the next. And so a lot of times you've got misplays because it's just hard to cover an entire professional baseball game with 2 people. And so you do have arguments and you have conflicts and you have ejections. So, and then you get to the big leagues and it's a bigger stage and you're under more of a microscope. But we definitely, we learn our craft in the minor leagues and then take it to the big leagues and try to perfect it.
Well, I love what you said earlier about young kids getting an umpiring because it teaches so much life skills, as does the game of baseball. But also, as I'm thinking here, I was thinking about, I would think, and folks, I know you got comments. If you got any questions on Facebook, here we go. Major League Umpire. Are you kidding, Ted Barrett? This is a great time to ask a question you have about Major League Umpires. Here's the part I want to ask because you have to use some common sense too throughout these games. I mean, there could be a regular season game, but it could be a playoff game, a World Series, a pressure game. That might change when it comes to an ejection, doesn't it? I mean, you might be a little bit more patient in some ways with a more high-profile game. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, we definitely. You've got high-profile games, World Series games. We don't want a player getting ejected for something frivolous. Before the game, we even tell the managers, hey, if there's help us out here, trying to keep guys in the game. But we're not going to allow them to run over us. We're not going to allow them to, say something of the magic words. There have been ejections in World Series games. Sure. It's unfortunate because you want the players to decide it. You want the managers to decide the game. We don't want to be a part of it. Believe me, when we walk out on the field, we're not looking to eject anybody. But, sometimes players eject themselves. This is the saying we have in umpiring. Just by virtue of wearing the uniform, we have to abide by that, and we have to make sure that we enforce the rules evenly. We understand in the higher pressure games, emotions run high. We'll definitely try to diffuse first before we have to eject somebody. And the World Series I've been involved with, the players they've been good with that. They know the importance of staying in the game, and luckily we haven't had to eject too many.
Ted, I'm sure you've had many managers throughout your career come out, some great managers that you've had, obviously, on teams come out, and you expect them to argue something, but yet they're doing something else, maybe something funny, or maybe they're just trying to stick up for their players, but they're really not talking about that. Is there any interesting stories there?
Yeah, that happens more than people think. A lot of times it's they're like, wow, look at the manager's really giving it to that umpire. But the manager also sometimes knows, when to take a stand, when not to take a stand. And one of my favorite ones that happened in that situation was Jim Tracy. You remember, a great manager with the Pirates and the Rockies, and he was with the Dodgers. This particular game was working the plate in Dodger Stadium, and I had to play at the plate, and I think Leduca was the catcher, and he thought he had tagged him out. I called the guy safe. Of course, this is before replay. A little bit of argument with the catcher, and Tracy came out and he was good about it. Went back to the dugout. Well, wouldn't you know, a couple innings later, got another play at the plate, called him safe. Leduca now is incensed, and so Jim Tracy runs out of the dugout. Being a good manager, keeping his catcher from getting ejected, he takes on the argument. And he tells me, he says, Ted, where I was sitting in the dugout, I had the perfect angle for both those plays, and I could see you got them both right. And he's being animated and with his hands, and everybody's thinking, boy, he's really giving it to Ted. And then he says, but I don't want my catcher getting ejected, and I'm going to get ejected. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my hat, and then you're going to throw me out. And I said, okay, Jim, that's what you want to do. So he throws his hat down. He kind of mutters and curses a little bit. And so I eject him. And as he turns to go back to the dugout, he tried to kick the chalk line and kind of kick some chalk up at me. And but he kind of had a misfire and stuck his foot in the ground. So he hobbled back to the dugout. Well, the next day, and this is what I love about guys like Piniella and Bobby Cox and Jim Tracy and the old school guys, they just forgot about it the next day like it never happened. So Jim comes limping up to the plate the next day, and he said, see, that's what I get for trying to kick chalk at you, Ted. He said, I broke my toe. Oh. So
he broke his toe, and he was nice to you.
Yes, he was. And he was a class man. And that's one of my favorites. Another one is I remember Terry Collins was great manager, was managing the Angels. And, he came out one day, I think I had to play at first. And he just said, you know what, Ted, I've had enough. My team's playing terrible. My coaching staff's not coaching well. I'm terrible. I'm done. You just got to throw me out, and I'm going to blow off some steam here. And, as he was going, he was saying some things, and I started laughing. I started smirking. He got in my face. He said, don't you laugh. You wipe that smile off your face because they're going to know what I'm doing out here. I want him to think that I'm really giving it to you. So
yeah, awesome. See, that's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that fans, don't hear, and they got to wonder what happens. I think everybody thinks that you're always serious and everything's all serious on the field all the time. There's some fun going on between players and umpires. Ted, okay, it takes talent to be an umpire at the big league level, minor league level. You got to obviously work your way up. Now, here's what's interesting. 1, you're a 3-sport athlete. 2, you're also a pretty big guy. 3, you're a boxer. 4, here you are. You got your doctorate in theology. You're involved in Christian ministries. I got to believe all that has to help as an umpire. First of all, most of the guys know that you're in ministry. So I would assume, the swear words are to a limit in some ways. Boxing, I'd be worried about, the boxing part. How much does that take effect as an umpire with the skills that you have along with all these other things? How much does that help?
I think it helps a lot, with the boxing, especially when I was younger, is the guys that when I first came up, I think they respected the fact that, that I boxed at a high level, and they love to talk boxing. That's another thing. A lot of people say, hey, what was the third baseman talking to you about? We were talking about boxing. Joey Votto, the first baseman with the Reds, he knows a ton about boxing. He knows more about boxing than I do. So we'll get together and talk about the fighters and the guys that he likes and what he's been watching. And also, it's funny you mentioned in ministry with the guys, the catchers, a lot of them, they won't swear around me, which is funny. Once in a while, I got to let a cuss word slip out. Oh, sorry, Ted. And I kind of chuckle because, it's respect. I appreciate that. Other guys, Sunday, baseball chapel will come in the locker room. They'll go to the home team, the visiting team, and then come to us and the umpires, and they do a great job of reaching out to us. But we'll be out on the field, and I might be playing second base, and the second baseman say, hey, what'd you think about that message today in chapel? And the next thing you know, we're out there talking about theology or, the book of John. And, it's funny because I think a lot of people, if they sometimes we have microphones on us, but if they really knew the conversations we were having, we're talking boxing, we're talking theology, we're talking about the NFL game that was last week. I think that helps because, players realize that you're just an everyday guy, just like them. We're all out there working together, trying to get things right. And here's something that people don't see. And I think this runs into watching the younger kids play. They might see a guy snap, throw his equipment, get ejected, start busting up the dugout with their bat. What they don't see is either after the game or the next day, that player will come out and he'll apologize. He'll say, hey, sorry about yesterday. I was having a bad day. Took it out on you. The other thing they don't see is the umpires they'll accept that apology. Hey man, don't worry about it. It's all good. Today's a new day. We'll start over. sometimes with an umpire, we go back and look at pitches, and I might have called a strike on a guy. He argued. We pretty much all go back when we get our results the next day. We'll look at the pitches. I might go back to a player, go, hey, you know what? You're right. That was a little bit outside. There's a give and take. There's a conversation that goes on. We're not as combative as people think. Heat of the moment, sometimes it happens, but for the most part, everybody knows we're out there doing a job. There's mutual respect, and it's forgot about. And again, like we're talking about the old managers, Lou Piniella. Lou Piniella would he'd lose it out on the field sometimes. Bobby Cox, and the next day it's like nothing happened. It's like here we are, we're punching the clock, going back to work again. It's like some of the older people remember the cartoon with the coyote and the sheepdog.
Yep.
They're out there blowing each other up with TNT and everything, but then they're punching the clock and say, hey, have a good weekend, Fred, and we'll see you Monday. And that's kind of what we are with players and umpires.
It's great to hear that, and I love the human story behind it. I remember because even as coaches, we say, well, if you make a mistake, admit it, and people will understand it. I'm talking about making a mistake, and letting your players know, hey, it was my fault. I made a bad decision at that time, and people admit to it. But I remember even umpiring, catcher would, I call a strike or whatever, and he didn't like it, and and I knew I missed it. Once in a while, I'd say, I missed it. What can they say, right? If you say I missed it, well, now they can't argue anymore. Is that something that's okay to do, right?
It is. You don't want to use that as a crutch and say I missed it every time just to get them from not arguing. And eventually, a player's going to go, well, quit missing it. This is the big leagues. We gotta. But there's now with replay it helps because if we do miss a call, it'll get straightened out, and now at the end of the day, as long as the call's correct, that's okay. And it's humbling for us. Sometimes we'll miss a call, we'll see it on the big screen with replay, but it's good teaching tool too, because okay, now what are we going to do to get it next time we get in position to get it right? But and once in a while you just have to admit when you watch a replay, you watch the pitch and you see, for whatever reason, I got that pitch wrong. It's all about accepting responsibility for our actions, right? And again, that's why it's a great life skill for a young man or young woman to learn that growing up. We accept responsibility for the decisions we make, and then we move on and try to get better. And sometimes the thing that people don't understand also is that working a major league game, you have pitches come in. The pitcher will run down to the video room and see where the pitch was. The players have iPads in the dugout, and they can see where. We're the only ones that don't know where the pitch was. We knew where it was in our mind, and so we really won't know until we get the results the next day. And a lot of times you open it up and say, "Yeah, hey, I got that pitch right." But then other times you look at it and say, "Yeah, I was wrong on that one." And sometimes there's nothing that needs to be said, and sometimes you're able to communicate with a guy. And but that goes toward building up credibility with the players. They know you care about it. I think a lot of players get frustrated because they think we just call a game and then go about our business, not caring what happened. And the opposite is true. Especially if we miss a call, man, nobody feels worse about it than we do. We just wear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of skills, if somebody's getting into umpiring, what kind of skills? And obviously, you talk about your size. Size has to help a little bit because of the intimidation factor, especially in the old days when you're arguing. But what kind of skills are Major League umpires, supervisors looking for? Like when you go to an umpire school, what kind of skills are they looking at so you can get better at them? And I'm assuming you're working on enhancing those skills all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we see a guy at umpire school, the first thing we look at, how does he look in a uniform, right? Because it is about appearance. You want to be in good shape, look good in your uniform. And then there's things you can do to control that. Or you could shine your shoes, make sure your shirt's pressed, your slacks are pressed, right? It's like a pilot walking on a plane. He's got his uniform on. You see a soldier, a police officer, they're looking sharp coming out of boot camp. We want our guys to look sharp like that. And then again, being in good shape, someone looks out there and sees you, they're like, okay, this guy's he's in good shape. He's his uniform looks good. And so a guy hasn't even made a decision yet, and he's kind of getting judged a little bit. And then from there, it's like, is he hustling? Is he working hard to get into position? Is he, how's his body language? Does he look like he wants to be out there? Does he look like he wants to be somewhere else? And then we get into the mental part of it, his rules knowledge. They're going to take rules tests down at umpire school. And, it's interesting, if you gave a major league player, and you know this from coaching, you give him a rules test, he's not going to do really well.
No.
He could hit the heck out of a ball and throw a ball 100 miles an hour, but he might not know the actual rules, especially the tricky ones. We know those inside out as umpires. And, if a guy can, and then it's an ongoing process. Like you said, we're always having to study. The rules don't change, but we might go 2 years without seeing a goofy play, a fan interference, an obstruction. So we want to be prepared when that does happen. We can jump right on it and make the decision. Another thing is that we look at a young umpire as like, is that a guy we would want to work with? Is he a stand-up guy? Is he honest with himself? Is he a good partner? All these things come into play. And so there's a lot of things that umpires, especially in the minor leagues, they need to separate themselves. And I always tell them they can do that by working hard, by hustling, and by wanting to get better every day. And to me, it's always like, I always thought I never want to take an inning off. I always want to be working hard, because that might be the day the supervisors there looking at me. And I decided not to work hard that day. Well, there's so many things in baseball that you can't control, but there are things that you can control, and that's working hard every day. And I think that goes for everybody on the field, whether you're the shortstop, the center fielder, the catcher, the umpire. You want to work hard, you want to improve, and you want to make sure every pitch you're not taking it off. So I think the guys you see in the big leagues are the ones that came through years in the minor leagues of being scrutinized, and they just continue to get better. And then once they get to the big leagues, it's like your career is starting over again from ground zero, and you've got to continue to get better and improve.
I've always been amazed by umpires in general, how they can remember all the rules. I mean, I know you got to keep reading the rule book. You got to stay on top of it. Like you said, you don't know when something's going to pop up, but there's so much. I got to believe there's times, I think sometimes they've changed on this, and I know instant replays kind of changed a lot of it, but in the old days, you might have a situation come up, and I'd like for you to discuss this a little bit, because when that situation comes up and the umpires sometimes get together to talk, I know it's not easy to change something because you're making somebody look bad, possibly. Talk about that area, how you guys deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's, especially in the big leagues, you got 4 guys, and the bottom line is we want to get it right.
That's the key.
And there's some things that, replay can't fix. There's some things that aren't reviewable. There's tough calls, and you've been behind the plate umpiring, and you might get a ball that chopped down, right? And the batter's going to hobble around. Maybe you got hit in the foot, or maybe he's trying to deke you. And you really can't see that. You kind of going on sound. Well, that play's not reviewable. And so sometimes on the bases, I might be at second base. I see the ball hit the guy's foot. I can come up. I can help out there. I can call it foul. I can help my partner. Pole benders, home runs right to the pole. Be it first base or third base, you get did it cross?
Are tough.
Yeah, and also it's tough to see those on replay because of the camera angles. And so sometimes the second base umpire can see that better than the first base umpire, say on a right field pole bender. And so the first base umpire is going to make the call. He's going to do his best to take all the information he gets to make the call. And sometimes he might call a ball home run, but it was foul. And the second base umpire saw that, and the plate umpire saw that. Now we're going to get together, all 4 of us, and as a crew chief now, I'm going to be in the huddle, and I'm going to say, okay, what do you got? And the first base umpire can say, hey, I'm not positive about this. I had a home run, but I didn't see it that great. I lost it in the background. And the second base umpire can say, hey, I saw it really well. I saw for sure that it was on the foul side of the ball. And the plate umpire will say, yes, I had it foul too. Okay, now as the crew chief, these guys are sure we're going to change it. So we're going to come back. And at that point, forget about your ego.
Yeah.
Because getting it right is the most important thing. And also, if I'm the guy that missed it and my crew can make it right, well, then at the end of the day, I'm happy. It's you don't beat yourself up for missing it, because those are really hard. And sometimes you just lose the ball in the background, or some parks are easier than others. There's the lights are tough now. They're putting LED lights in the fences for advertisement and things like that. And everybody loses the ball in the lights. It happens, players, coaches, and then we do too. So if our partners who are at a different angle can help out, well, that's great. And then at the end of the day, also, you've got replay where our colleagues in New York can help us out too and get it right.
And I think the key words there, and you said it perfectly, man, that is, we just want to get it right. That's all you want, especially at your level, because you know what? It is just a ball game. It happens. At the younger levels, we tell young kids, look, it's out of your control. You make mistakes. Umpires make mistakes. So let it go. It's over. You can't do anything about it. But at the big league level, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of money at stake. There's, everybody wants to get to the World Series. As you get to the playoffs, the pressure is even harder. Here you are. I mean, all the playoffs you work, the World Series, behind the plate, man, that pressure gets really high. How do you guys deal with, like, when I said earlier, we're talking about training, right? Obviously, the number one question is you've got to have, I would assume that as you guys get going more and more into the game, your vision training's got to be critical as you get older, because you got to train vision as baseball players do too. And we always say that's the number one thing to train. Number two is the mental part, because of the pressure. Is there anything you do for those? Like, do you have any vision training you continue to do, or any mental training to help you deal with all this? I mean, when you're behind the plate in the World Series, I mean, there's a lot at stake. How do you train yourself to be ready for that?
Yeah, you just it's got to be concentration. You've got to lock in, and for that 3, 4, 5, 7.5 hour games of his that I worked.
Yeah, you've had the longest, right? 7 hours and 20 minutes, I think it was, right?
Yeah, I think so. And that, in 2018 in Game 3 of the World Series.
Yep.
We also had 4 hour. We went 4 hours in Atlanta my last time, and I think we went 4:19 in Colorado my first time. So yeah, it's you got to concentrate that whole time. Obviously, between innings, you can kind of relax for a minute, but then when the pitcher's on the mound with the ball, it's got to be concentration. And that's so it's helped me. I think with the boxing helped me was be able to block out the external things. When you're in the ring and you've got people in the corner and you've got fans in the stands, everything to bring it right here to what's in front of you. You've got punches coming at you. I don't know how the MMA guys do it, because I had hard enough time trying to figure out what the guy's going to do with his right and left hand.
Yeah, and then he's kicking.
The MMA guys got feet and elbows and knees and everything else coming at him. And
absolutely.
It was hard enough with hands. And so I think it helped me just to concentrate on, what's going on with the pitcher, with the ball, with the pitch coming in. And we've got to lock our eyes in. We've got to, you talked about vision training. We work hard on following the ball with our eyes without moving our head. You think about a camera. If the camera's moving, the pitcher's going to be blurry. So we lock that head in. But then we want to move our eyes and follow the ball. You're talking about 100 mile an hour. That's another thing that's changed when I came up. Greg Maddux was throwing 88. He was just so completely accurate where he threw it. But now these guys are all throwing 99, 100. You got starters throwing 100 in the fifth inning, which is crazy. But so you really got to concentrate and watch that ball all the way with your eyes. I worked some World Series games where, the season ended, and then I went into the divisionals, and maybe one time I had Game 4, I think, and it was a sweep. So now I'm in the World Series. I hadn't worked in a few weeks. But we'll get to a batting cage, or we've done it here in the Arizona Fall League, where we'll go out and watch guys throwing bullpens. We were in 2018. I worked with Jim Reynolds and Kerwin Danley. We all lived in the same area. We went over to Chandler Gilbert Community College, and we had the junior college pitchers throwing, and we're behind the catchers, just so we can train our eyes to track the ball. So when we got back there after having not worked the plate, we were able to do that. And so it's hard to practice that. So that's why I love spring training, because that's really our practice. And now my eyes are getting ready. my muscles that I haven't used too much because, there's really no way to practice umpiring. We try to work out and stay in shape and lift weights, but then when you get out on the field, you're using different muscles. And so spring training is a great way to not only for our physical bodies to get ready, but also the eyes and the vision, training that and staying with the speed of a ball.
And I love the part about the boxing part because, so there we go. All this stuff that you did, multi-sport athlete, boxing, that had to help with your training. And the other part is the velocity, like you said, the increase in velocity. I'm amazed that, at 101, 103, how you can see the ball. And not only that, now we're talking about a curveball, then a slider, balls moving constantly. Here's a question I've always had. I know there's some guests out there that have asked this question before because I've seen it on social media. I'd love to get your input on this. A guy's throwing the ball 100 miles an hour and a guy takes a check swing. Okay. First of all, you've got to see the ball, but how can you see the swing at the same time? One, can you see it pretty good? And two, should we change something there? Should it be where, let's say you call a strike, right? Because he swung. Should the batter be able to appeal the first base to the umpire to help there? It's just a question because I'm always trying to think outside the box because, man, that's hard to make that call, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Check swings are one of the hardest things. And like we talked about, I really want to concentrate on locking my eyes in on that ball and following it all the way into the glove. Sometimes out of your peripheral vision, you can see what the bat does. But really for me, it's like when the pitch is maybe in the dirt where it's going to bounce or it's way over, my head and the catcher's head. And he's having to reach up high to get it. I can give up on that pitch with my eyes because I know it's out of the zone. And at that point, I can take my eyes to the bat. So we talk about this on our crew all the time. As the plate umpire, you're not going to call it a swing unless you're sure it was the swing. Maybe you saw it out of the peripheral and he went so far that there's no doubt. Or the pitch was in the dirt and you were able to take your eyes to the bat and you saw it really well. Then as the plate umpire, you're going to call it. If you didn't see it, we're not going to guess. We're going to say no and go to our base umpires for help. So, the rule is you can't check it unless the plate umpire says no swing, then you can appeal to the base umpire. But as the plate umpire, if you do say he swung, there's no appeal. That's judgment final. And so I want to make sure that I'm getting it right if I do that. Now, as the base umpire, again, it's concentration. You've really got to lock in on I watch the head of the bat. And the other difficult thing about that is there's really no clear-cut interpretation on what a check swing is. So did he offer at the pitch? Well, did he offer at the pitch might be one thing for one guy, another thing for another. And so, as umpires, we really tried hard to be consistent with that. So we're all calling the same thing, but it is very difficult.
Especially trying to concentrate, like you said, on every pitch, because, that one time, just like players, that one time you don't concentrate is when that ball's coming, your area and you got to make the call and you don't want to be, in that situation where you weren't ready for that call to make. An example would be the check swing, right? All of a sudden, home plate umpire asks you and now you're not sure, but the fallback is if you're not sure, never call it a strike.
Yeah. I'm not going to call a check swing a strike unless I'm sure that the guy offered at it. I'm not saying that I don't make mistakes, but in my mind, watching it in real time, he went around too far. So I'm going to call that, and I made mistakes on that, but it's also tough too. People don't realize you got a lot of black colored bats, dark colored bats, and then you've got dark backgrounds because the fielders want dark backgrounds, and we do too. So the white ball can come out of it. And so it is really tough sometimes to pick up exactly what that dark colored bat did. And these guys are so strong. They'll whip the bat out and bring it back. Did he go too far? Did he not? Again, I might say, well, I'm not sure. So I'm going to say no, but then they show the replay and he came all the way around and whipped it back. He fooled me. And so it's very difficult. And I watch some of the games I love watching MLB Network when they'll show games from the 60s or the 70s. Yeah. And it seems like guys went around a little bit further and they never asked for help back then. It if the plate umpire said yes, then he went. If he didn't, then he didn't. And now, it seems like, they ask on every time the bat moves, which I don't blame them, because if they can get a strike, that makes a big difference, and they act that. So,
sure.
That's just a difficult call. And
again,
I think,
speaking about MLB Network, I wanted to ask you this. You got MLB Network, but now you got social media. And I know umpires, you guys have rules on social media and all that. But there's, you also have to have some restraint too, because there's, obviously there's comments out there that you look at and you got to go, you'd like to answer it because you can answer it in a way where you can show them that they're wrong, but obviously you cannot, right? Social media, you kind of have to stay off of.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to ignore that. I really do. Sometimes friends will send something, go, hey, look what this guy said. It's like, don't send me that.
Right.
Don't send me that. I really try to stay off it as much as I can, because there's nothing good comes out of it. Or someone sent me something, last year, and it said, look, this person said something really nice about you. And then there was a couple of guys said something really nice about, and then as you go down the list, it was not so nice. So I'm like, okay, don't read past the second one, is what he told me. So, and you're right. Sometimes it's like, no, that's not what happened. I want to get out and I want to tell you my story of what really happened, but
you can't,
you can't, it doesn't, and it probably wouldn't do any good. And so, the people that know the game, they know. The people that know baseball, they know the truth. The people that you respect, that's all I care about.
Ted, I know you talked about concentration, and I'm thinking of watching, even when I watch a game on TV, the mics are pretty close. I can hear some fans on the television yelling things. Now, if I can hear them on television, and maybe it's, only 5,000, 7,000 fans. Now you could really hear certain comments. And I know you said concentration, but you've got to hear some of that stuff. How do you keep it? How do you stay focused? Because you got to hear some of that stuff in the background. Is there a way you train yourself to do that?
It's funny. It was worse in the minor leagues. I remember being in the Cal League, and the backstops they're about as close to the plate as you are. There's no room back there, and you can hear everything. And the crowds were small, so you could hear one leather lunged guy up there screaming. I remember nickel beer night in Tucson. It was terrible. They were just go, and in the big leagues then it was 40,000 people, but it's more of a buzz now. It's kind of, you can't really hear and once in a while you hear an individual guy say something, but you kind of ignore that, and eventually he gets tired and stops. Sure. And quite frankly, the guys, the people that are sitting in the seats right behind you, that's pretty expensive. Those are pretty expensive seats. So yes. I think you got people maybe that are more into the experience than yelling at the umpire so much. But it is once in a while you'll get a guy that just keeps yelling, and then once in a while you hear a kid say something, and that kind of hurts. It's like, oh man, come on, don't let your kids say that, even if they're yelling at the opposing team. But yeah, it's you're able to block that out. And once in a while, I'll even say to myself, hey, don't let that guy in your head. Don't, just keep that guy out of your head. And then that usually works pretty well. Sure. Pray for patience. Sometimes I'll be like, you think about the old WWJD, what would Jesus do? Well, once in a while I hear a guy yelling, but they don't really understand the rule, right? Maybe on an infield fly that was dropped or something, and they're just going crazy, and forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. It's like they don't get it.
See, you got a big advantage there, being a minister, understanding that. You could forgive quick. The other area, in the old days, you always heard this. I'd love to get your take on it, because you were behind the plate, umpiring behind the plate on a 300th win for Greg Maddox. You always heard about Maddox, Glavine, and Schmoltz, especially Glavine, but Maddox too. They always seem to get a little bit more outside the plate than most pitchers. But I got to believe that because of their consistency is the reason they got those calls, because they're always around the zone, compared to a guy who throws 100 one way and all of a sudden he throws a strike and it's completely on the other side of the plate. First of all, what was the experience like for that 300th game? And two, a little bit about the calls these pitchers get because of that good.
Well, the Maddox game, I remember that was a fun game. It was out in San Francisco, a day game. I remember and also, Greg was getting a little bit older. And so even though he was around a couple more years, but you start thinking, and then I remember thinking, gosh, the way baseball is now, this has got to be the last 300 game winner.
Sure.
But I think Glavine did it after he did. But it was cool to be a part of history. It's like how many guys get out here to be able to work a 300th win. And, you talk about them saying that they got such, big plates. I do know this, when I worked Greg Maddux, especially in his prime, I was in the American League, so I didn't really get to experience those Braves teams as much. But, we came together in 2000, so I was able to call Greg a few times. And, he would come out and just have that pinpoint control. So he'd throw a pitch on the corner. He'd call it a strike. He'd go a little bit off the plate. He would call it a strike. He was testing to see how far he could go. He'd go even farther out. You'd call it a ball. Well, he'd bring it back to that spot where you called it a strike, and he would stay there all day.
Amazing.
And and he was that pinpoint with it. And it was amazing because it wasn't that hard, right? So you're thinking, someone watches it today, they think, how do you get anybody out? But it was that pinpoint control. And, if he's throwing 2 inches off the plate and the umpire was calling it 2 inches off the plate, he would live there all day. And the zone has changed since I came up. It used to be, if the catcher set up, and he hit his spot, the pitcher would get rewarded. And because, you're trying to call a 3D zone in your head, right? There's no lines on like the TV box has. And so you just try to establish a zone and then stay consistent with it and call it both ways for both teams. And that's really what we did back then. And it's how a young umpire got respect. Now with the technology, it's changed a little bit where we have to stay within the confines of the strike zone. We can't reward a pitcher for being 2 inches off the plate hitting his spot. It's just the mentality of the game. Another thing is when I first came up, people say, well, you don't call the high strike. Well, the pitchers didn't want it above the belt. The pitching coach didn't want it above the belt. The hitter did, right? Because he's going to hit it a long way. So they'd throw a pitch a few inches above the belt that was probably technically a rule book strike, but nobody was upset about that being called a ball because they didn't want it there anyway. It's that one at the hollow of the knee, rule book strike, that they really wanted you to call and stay with and be consistent with, because that's the way they can make their living.
Yeah,
I think things have changed.
And it's got to be tough when catcher sets outside, right? And you got, say, 100-mile-an-hour fastball, 95, but yet that he might throw a strike, but it's in the inside corner. So here you are set up for the outside. He throws it all the way across the plate. Can you make that call as long as you know it's a strike, or it's got to be a tough call when it's coming 100 miles an hour? Yeah,
if it's in the zone, it's a strike. That's another thing that's kind of changed, because years ago it was like, well, he missed his spot. So, you can't really reward him for that. But now it's turned into, hey, a strike's a strike, a ball's a ball, even though the catcher had to reach across. But yeah, those are pitches that if you're not really concentrating, you might miss, because you've got, you might see the catcher reach his arm completely and extended it. And immediately in your head, you're thinking, okay, that's a ball, that's outside the zone. But if you stay with it and track it, and despite the fact that the catcher had to reach, it was in the zone. I mean, you got to call that a strike. And if you don't, you're gonna be wrong. And we get graded. One thing that drives me crazy is people say umpires aren't accountable. There's no accountability. Well, that's nothing could be further from the truth, because every pitch we call, every play we call, every situation we have, it's all evaluated. We're graded on it. They base postseason assignments off it. All these things. We're just as accountable as the players for everything that happens on the field.
Ted, talk about no hitters. You've caught no hitters, 3 perfect games, and it says here you're the only umpire in history behind the plate for 2 perfect games. I mean, unbelievable, 2 perfect games, let alone 1, let alone no hitter. Did you know that as it gets later in the game, did you know it was a no hitter? You guys even pay attention to that?
Well, with David Cohn's game, 1999, I remember it was after 3 innings, we pulled the tarp for a rain delay. Jim Evans was the crew chief, pulled the tarp, pretty good downpour. And usually what happens is the pitcher doesn't come back out, right? So I was joking in the locker room. I said, "Oh man, it's too bad he had a perfect game going."
In the third inning.
After 3 innings, yeah. And then he comes back out when we resumed. And but I'd kind of forgot about that. I remember looking up and around the 8th inning and no runs, no hits, no errors. But I couldn't, you get locked into a game. And I couldn't remember, was there a walk and a double play? And I'm okay, he's facing the minimum. And you don't want to ask anybody, right? Because you don't want to
right.
The jinx and things like that. So I kind of sit back and the pop up to end the game. Brocious brings it in. Girardi runs out, hugs Cone. We walk off the field, and I knew it was a no hitter because I could look up and see the 0. And I asked the crew, I said, "Was that a perfect game?" And they said, "Yeah, it was." Now fast forward to 2012, and about the 5th inning, the way Kane was throwing, he had everything going that night, hitting spots, his pitches. He's another guy who was a location guy. Didn't necessarily throw really hard, but he could hit his spots. And on this night in Candlestick, it was a night game. And about the 5th inning, I knew it was a perfect game. And so walking off the field, when he got that final out, the ground ball, third baseman Fields throws him out, I knew that was a perfect game. So sometimes, and other times, I've had someone gets a base hit in the 8th and you look up and you go, "Oh, wow, he had a no-hitter going. I didn't even realize that." It's kind of, with the Cone one, some people said, "How did you not know it was a perfect game?" Well, again, I could see the scoreboard said no hits, but I couldn't, you get locked into the game and that was a fun game too, because there's a lot of tough plays. Every perfect game, the Giants won. Melky Cabrera, I remember a ball that he ran down. Snyder, the catcher for the Astros, he hit a bomb that I thought would have been up in that big glove out there in San Francisco, and somehow the wind just held it up, and the ball lands in the center fielder's glove. So I think there's a lot of divine intervention going on there too. And and then I'll tell you another a fun game that wasn't really so much covered by the media because it kind of went by the wayside. After Matt Cain's perfect game in 2012, a couple years later, I'm in San Francisco and I'm working first base, and Buster Posey's playing first base. He said, "Hey, did you work this out?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're going to have the plate tomorrow." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It's Cain's last game. He's retiring." I had no idea. And
Wow.
I got back there behind the plate, and he ends up throwing 5 shutout innings, and he walks off the mound, and obviously he was emotional, and that was kind of fun to think, hey, a few years ago we stood there and had perfect game with me back there, and now a few years later it's his last time saddling up and throwing, and so that was kind of cool to be a part of that.
I gotta wonder, is it easier to know you have a perfect game going or not to know, as far as umpiring, making those calls? Would you rather know or not know? Because I would think if you knew no hitter, like you said, you look at the scoreboard, but if you knew it was a perfect game going, I would think the pressure mounts, and it could change mentally some of your decisions, even if you don't make. But if you don't know, at least you're calling it as it is, right? A regular game.
Yeah. So, really you should, in theory, it's like every pitch, you've got to concentrate. So I'd almost rather not know, because I'm going to call it. But like I talked about, when I did know it was a no-hitter in Cone's case and a perfect game in Kane's case, it was just kept telling myself, concentrate, one pitch at a time, call a ball, call a strike. These are things I'm telling myself. You don't want to be part of the story. You talk about pressure, because you don't want to call ball 4 on a pitch that was a strike. You cost them a perfect game.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you don't want to go too far and call a strike on a pitch off the plate. It's like, well, look, he got help from the umpire there. And then, talk about working first base, there's a lot of pressure, especially before replay. We look at Jim Joyce at first base with Armando Galarraga, and 2 outs, there's a ground ball, and Jim, great umpire, as you know, one of the best of all time. And he was just trying to get the play right, concentrate. Boom, misses the call. Thank God now we would be able to go to New York and get that corrected.
Yes.
So it's pressure.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because no different than a player, and it's sad that, a great umpire like him, you remember him for that one call. No different than a player like Bill Buckner makes a mistake on a ground ball and he cost the World Series. Really? Come on. So sometimes I wonder, the other part of this you mentioned, you tell me umpires are superstitious. Got to give me some of those. What kind of superstitions you guys have?
Yeah, well, first you're right on the part of like Bill Buckner, great hitter. One of my heroes growing up, and you bring up his name and everybody thinks about that one play. You think Don Denkinger. Don Denkinger.
Yep, that's who I was thinking of.
Yeah, one of the great umpires of all time. It's the one game playoff with Yankees and Red Sox. Don Denkinger's back there. The game 7 of the Twins Braves, right? With Smoltz and Morris. I mean, one of the great pitching duels of all time. Don Denkinger's back there behind the plate.
The Mill Pap is still talking about. Remember the perfect game he threw? I think he blamed the home plate umpire on a call that he should have had a perfect game. I mean, we need to get over all that.
Right, and that was Bruce Fremming.
Yes.
Which is it's funny because I love that story. And Bruce, one of the great characters of the game. For us, a lot of guys my age, he was one of our mentors. But they came to Bruce after the game. They said, you called ball 4. You could have been, and I forget how many perfect games were at the time, say 15. But they said, Bruce, you could have been the 16th umpire to have a perfect game. And he said, hey, name one of the other 15.
Yeah.
Which is so, and Bruce, he wanted to get the call right, and by all accounts did get the call right. But I know Milt, would disagree if he was on here, but yeah.
Well, I can name one guy that had 3 perfect games as an umpire, right? and 2 perfect games. Excuse me, that behind the plate, which is incredible. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were saying.
No, you had a second part to that question. You were talking about sorry, we went. I took it in a different direction. But.
No. Sometimes I do that because I'll have 2 questions in one. More. I was talking about the superstition. I was wondering about the umpires. What kind of superstition you have? I know, like coaches. We won't walk on the chalk line when we go across the line and all that.
Yeah, we're just like players in that. It's a culture. It's part of the game. And some guys take it a little more seriously than others. You watch them. For me, I don't believe in superstitions. I believe, I believe God's up there in control of everything. But I do say this: I am a person of routine. And as I get dressed to go out and work a game, I'll put my plate shoes on, and then my pants, my shin guards, all certain order. And some people say, "Well, are you superstitious?" I say, "No, because I'll forget something."
Yeah.
As I get dressed, and you've umpired, you've known this. The worst feeling would be to go out there behind home plate and not have a cup.
Oh yeah.
I remember.
Forget your clicker. How about if you forget your clicker?
I've done that. I have to decide. It's an indicator. Pete. We don't call it a clicker.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
Indicator. Sorry.
I've sent the low man back. I remember Lance Barksdale, who I've had the pleasure of working with for years, and he was a fill-in guy. We were in Toronto one day, and I forgot my indicator, and I sent him back up, and it was kind of a long run to the Toronto umpire's dressing room. He comes back to me. I go, "Hey, I forgot my pen too." He turns around and runs back. So the rest of the time he was with us, he made sure when I was working the plate, "Okay, now Chief, you got your brush, you got your indicator, you got your," because he didn't want to turn around and run back.
Sure.
I remember I was with Tim Timmons. First time I was a crew chief in the LCS. We had the Cubs and the Mets. Tim was working the plate, great veteran umpire, and he was going out there, and he gets to home plate. He said, "I forgot my shin guards." Well, City Field's a terrible place to forget your shin guards. So we had to we sent a runner back there to try to get the clubhouse guy to bring him out, and Tim went one way to the locker room. The clubhouse guy came out with him, and then Tim came back. It was kind of like Keystone Cops. I was giving him such a hard time. I said, "How do you forget your shin guards?" Well, a few years later, I'm working a game in DC, just a late April game, and I go out there behind the plate, and the catcher catches in and says, "Hey, how you doing?" I get down on my stance. I'm like, "I forgot my shin guards."
Oh,
I said, I'll be
wow.
right back. Well, thank God we were in DC where the locker room was pretty much right behind the plate. I was able to run, throw them on, come back, and be ready before they threw the ball down. So,
Wow.
and not superstition, but I will get dressed in a certain order so I don't forget anything and have to go
Sure.
back because, we have, that's going to probably cost you a fine just among the crew. We have fun, kind of fine each other for doing stupid things. And that would have been a pretty hefty one. So
Hey,
luckily,
there's got to be a time in all these games you've done in your career. There's got to be a time where you're not sure the count. Now I get it. You can look at the scoreboard, but I know as a manager, I don't always trust the scoreboard either because that guy's sleeping sometimes. What do you do when you don't know if you think the count is wrong? You just ask another umpire.
yeah, it's funny because again, you're concentrating, you're locked in. 9 times out of 10, the scoreboard's right. But even in the big leagues, sometimes the scoreboard's wrong. And, I'll tell you what I've done. And I'll ask the catcher and I'll ask the hitter. I'll go,
Oh yeah.
Hey, is it 2-2 or 3-2? I got 2-2.
Right.
And then the catcher will, and I'll tell him, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. So,
that's right.
because sometimes.
But if you ask them both, you're going to, if you get 2 different calls, now you know something's up.
Yeah. So, but a lot of times, and here's the tough thing too. It's sometimes on the bases, you try to concentrate, help the guy, we'll kind of signal each other. It's 2-2, 3-2. But then you go to replay, and I've had to do this once and it's embarrassing. Go to replay, say, hey, I lost the count. And then they have to, in the replay room, they have to go back to the start of the at-bat. So it takes a while for them to rewind it. And then you come, so I tell the catcher, it's like, hey, 2-2 or 3-2, and tell me the truth because we're going to get it right eventually. Yep. So don't lie to me.
That's great
and then
stuff.
They'll say, no, it's 3-2. But and that's a time too. You can kind of have fun with it.
Sure.
With the catcher and joke a little bit and hey, no, I don't lie. It's like okay.
Yeah, because you think about it. Look at all the times you have to know the count on every pitch. I mean, you talk about concentration, making sure, and sometimes even with the indicator, you might hit it wrong, right? You might click it twice by accident, didn't realize it, right? And all of a sudden you look at the count, it could be wrong. Is there any signs you can tell us about that you can actually tell that you're allowed to? Any signs you guys use as umpires to kind of communicate so people don't know what's going on?
Yeah, we'll kind of we have a little sign that we flash each other if we're unsure of the count. And then we'll give the count. And that's another thing. If someone goes to a game, a major league game, and I know you're there to watch the players, the great players that are out there, but maybe take a half inning or an inning and just watch the crew. Because if you watch the 4 of us, there's a lot of interaction. We'll signal before a pitch. Okay, if a ball's hit, if I'm the plate umpire, I'll say, hey, 1 out. We'll remind each other the outs. The base hit, I'm going to go to third base. And then, the third base umpire will say, I'm coming across. We're verbally given signs. The second base umpire will signal that, he's back and he's going out on the fly ball. All kind of things that we're Jim Evans used to say, an umpire's the worst thing to happen to an umpire is surprise. So we want to prepare ourselves, just like a shortstop's thinking, okay, ground ball here, I'm going to go 2, hard hit ball, I'm going home. We talk to ourselves like that too. And it's a way to remind each other, hey, 1 out, bases loaded, infield fly, 2 outs, we'll point to our wrist, possibility of a time play, all kinds of things, just so we're heads up and we're ready to go. Because every night we're out there, 140 some games a year, and we want to make sure that we don't just fall into the routine, that we expect the unexpected. We'll remind each other, situations, what to do on ground balls. And we'll talk between innings too. A little heads up. Hey, remember this guy? This is a left-hander. Sometimes he balks. He steps too far. We want to be heads up. We want something to happen and us be surprised by it. So
love to hear that. How about the time play for our fans out there? What does that mean? Time play.
So time play. Yeah. Well, if you've got, say you've got 2 outs and a guy at first base, you see a ball hitting the gap, right? It's really exciting. The guy from first, he's going to come all the way around, try to score. The batter runner, say it's a catcher, a slower guy, he's trying to stretch it into a double, or a fast guy trying to stretch it into a triple. If the ball comes in and the tag's applied and the batter runner is out before the runner can cross home plate, no run's going to score. If the guy touches the plate before the tag's made on the batter runner, then the run's going to score. And that's, these guys are so fast, as you know, we try to line up and do the best we can to see if the run scored before the out's made. And, the other thing about that too, is that's reviewable. If we're not sure, we make the call, we can go to replay and get help with that. But, that's, and for the young kids watching there, that's why you always run hard. I know you coaches are telling them that, but, with 2 outs and you're going to score, turn on the afterburners because you want to get there before the guy's tagged. We got frozen there, Pete. Technical difficulties, please stand by. All right, we got some technical difficulties. All right. I was still on my Zoom call, but